Introduction to Emotion Regulation, Part 2. So what gets in the way of being able to change emotions or kind of change the course or be in control of emotions altogether? So things like biology, how you are made, your temperament. Some people are just a bit more chilled out than other people. Some people are quite highly strung. So some of that is about just kind of how you are. Lack of skill. Maybe you don't know what to do. No one's ever taught you, or the experiences you've had growing up, and the way that people around you have managed emotions. You've learned how to do it in that way rather than in any other options. You use your emotions as a tool to get what you want. It always works. So why would you give it up? If getting angry and being aggressive gets you what you want, then why would you think to change that? Because it obviously works to a certain extent. Being moody, you might like being that way, and other people expect that from you because that's just how you've always been. Emotional overload, so you might feel so overloaded that you just combust with emotion. It just spills out of every pore. So it's just at that surface all the time, and it might feel like it doesn't take much to tip out an emotion. Myths about emotion. You might believe that emotions are bad, or that you are weak for feeling certain things, or doing things in a certain way. Or you might think that it is who I am, which, that might fit in with, the thing about what I said with the temperament. And it is to a certain extent, but these are things that what you do with emotions, these are things that you can control, and those are things that you can change. So it might be tricky because you might think, well, I'm just this way and this is how I am. But behaviours are the things that you can control. So how do emotions work? So something happens, whether that's internal, a thought, or a memory, or something happening in your external environment, so something physically going on. Our brains think about it and process it and interpret it, and then you experience changes in your brain and your body, and then we feel a certain emotion. And you can have two people in exactly the same scenario, but their brains and their kind of the way they process that situation will be very different, and they can feel very different emotions. So the interpretation and how we process what is going on can have a massive impact on the emotions that we feel. So we show emotion in our face and in our body. We can pull certain expressions or hold our body in a certain way that will convey a certain emotion. However, some people have learned not to do this. They've learned to hide their emotions and also hide, that display of emotion on their body or their face, which makes it very, very difficult for other people to read what's going on for them, and they often feel quite misunderstood. So they might have to work harder in terms of conveying their emotions by saying something or doing something if that's an issue for them. Afterwards, we might still feel different after we've conveyed an emotion, or we might actually feel a different emotion, which I'll come on to in a minute. So emotions are sudden and they're short-lived, they're seconds to minutes. And we talk about the rise and the fall of an emotion because they don't last forever. It's a bit like the weather, 1 minute it's sunny and the next minute it's raining, but it's not going to rain forever. So you know that there's going to be a change coming. However, they can keep going if we let them. So you can kind of come out of an emotional situation and calm down, and then something might happen and it can be re-triggered. So we feel as if we're hanging on to that same emotion for days on end, but we haven't kind of experienced it for the whole time. It's just been re-triggered. It's just been on the surface, so it's popped up again. And they're linked to what we do. Our emotions drive us, and we call this like an action urge. So emotions drive us to do certain things. So the feeling of fear drives us to run away. The feeling of shame drives us to want to hide. When people are feeling really shameful, they literally cover their face with their hands because they just don't want to be seen. So we all have the same emotions. They're universal. from country to country, the same emotions are experienced, and it's what makes us all human. So we have primary emotions and we have secondary emotions. The primary emotion is that first initial gut reaction, gut emotion that kicks in, and then the secondary emotion, which can come quite quickly after the primary emotion, it follows on from that. So, for example, you might feel really angry and you might do certain things, and then that might be very, very quickly. Your secondary emotion might be shame, and you might feel very, very shameful for what you've done, or even very guilty about what you've done. So the primary emotion there was anger, and it was managed in a way that made you feel shameful and guilty. Which is worse? It depends kind of how you manage the feelings, really. What starts an emotion off? There's always a prompt, an event, a cue, a trigger, whatever word you want to use, that kind of sets off an emotional response in action. And that can be anything from a thought, a feeling, a memory. So these are things that we don't even, we don't see, and we don't necessarily know that someone is experiencing these things because they're in their mind. But so you might be next to someone and you might think, well, nothing happened. I don't know why they reacted in that way. But if something has triggered a thought, a feeling, a memory, then that might have then triggered an emotional response. Or it might be something someone has said or done, something a bit more external to a person. And it can take the form of anything from a text message, a voicemail, letter, email, something not happening in the way that you expected. Because quite often we try and plan things out and plan situations out in our mind as if that's going to, change the event. And if it doesn't go the way that we've planned, we can often get quite upset about that. The weather can have a massive impact on our mood and our emotions. Quite often people say when it's sunny, I feel really happy, and when it's cold, wet and raining, then my mood dips. So the weather is an external factor that could trigger off an emotional response. Someone saying something, someone doing something. So those are things that are a bit more external. So you can change the emotion by changing the prompting event. For example, staying away from a person or a situation, ignoring things or people that you know will stress you out. If you know that someone absolutely winds you up and makes you so angry that you want to just scream all the time, stop hanging out with them. Change your social circle. Don't keep doing that to yourself, because unless something changes, the way that you feel isn't going to change. So you also have to grab onto the prompting event to get emotional. So what you don't know doesn't harm you. So quite often people want to know the ins and outs of everything and all the details, that someone's been talking about them and someone's been saying this and this and this and this, and it's like, do you know what? If I didn't know that, then I wouldn't feel this way. So how has that, improved my life? It hasn't, So sometimes just not knowing things is quite helpful. You can misinterpret and misunderstand the prompting event as well, and this causes unwanted and even unnecessary emotions. So we can see something, or we see a snapshot of a situation, and we've kind of written the whole story to it without checking the facts out, without really knowing what's going on. We've got 2 and 2 and we've come up with 10, and we're fuming about it. We're fuming, raging, but actually that isn't even what went on. So we'll come on to a thing called check the facts later. There are certain things that can make us more vulnerable to falling into emotional minds. So things like not eating enough, not getting enough sleep, drinking too much alcohol, substances, not taking medication as prescribed, or feeling physically ill, feeling in pain. That can often push people further into that emotional place. Also a history of trauma. People can react in a way where they still feel under threat and in danger when the situation's very different, but they're kind of responding in that same way from a very emotional place. So you can learn to let go of your trauma and respond to things in a different way. Biological changes happen when we get emotional. So your brain fires up when you're emotional, your nervous system causes changes in your body, and when biology changes, emotions change. And that can be, fueled as well by substances or medication. So it can be quite a chemical reaction as well going on in your body.